Once again, I have forgotten. I don't know what it is, but I'm constantly forgetting to turn off the mute of my microphone. And the reason I mute my microphone is because while the music's going, right, I got the speaker in here, you get some sort of echo going, and I just constantly forget. Thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it. I am not some kind of nerd. I am the king of nerds, as my wife would like to believe. I don't know that I'm necessarily that way. I just thought it was kind of a cool little background. So, welcome to Coffee with Steve on today, May 21st, 2019. Thank you so much for joining me today. Boy, today's topic is politics and technology kind of wrapped in one, because there's some big stuff going on right now in the world of technology. It has to do with the cell phone manufacturer Huawei. Now, I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right. I honestly don't know. So Huawei is a cell phone manufacturer in China, and they are growing a lot. So we're going to talk about that today and some of the tariff stuff that's going on with Qualcomm and Intel and Google and all sorts of good stuff. All right, so just to set the stage here. So there's Qualcomm, there's Intel, there's chip manufacturers that they do business with China to export chips and import chips to and from China. And I've talked about on this channel here before also how Israel is kind of a little bit involved, especially because they're starting to broker new deals with China. And I was talking about how Bloomberg, right? And I'm not big on conspiracy theories. I really am not. I don't like to advance like, hey, did you know? But I do find it quite interesting that a former head of Mossad is basically in charge of the company that broke the news to Bloomberg that China was dropping these special chips on motherboards, and nobody was ever able to actually verify that, right? But it became a huge thing, and all of a sudden, all these technology companies stopped doing business with China. And now we've got tariffs by, Donald Trump has got an executive order saying he's going to do some tariffs on China. And we got this trade war thing going on. So let's kind of talk about that a little bit. So the first thing I wanted to show you guys is really kind of earlier on. So this was back in the beginning of the month. Okay, so this was a news article at the beginning of the month. Huawei's phone sales are ballooning while Apple and Samsung's slump. I wonder, okay, we've got different competing cell phones, and you may never have heard of Huawei. Like, who is Huawei? Well, Huawei is actually the second largest cell phone manufacturer. You've never heard of them because they don't do business in America. But if you're in other countries, you might have heard of them. Like I think the UK has them, and there's some concerns in the UK, in fact, about there's been some concern about spying, and once again, nothing is ever confirmed. It's funny how this goes. Like, we suspect this Chinese company of doing spying with the technology. Do you have any proof? No. But we should just do it as a precautionary measure. Right, that's kind of what it is, and it's the same thing with the Bloomberg report, right? It's kind of like we suspect China is doing this thing. We think we found a chip for it, and we're going to post that this is what's going on. And there's several companies that have been impacted. Okay, but what's the actual evidence? Have you found this chip? No. We haven't really found the chip, but we just we think that it's there. We did discover it, but we're not going to tell you like how we discovered it or anything like that. I don't know. Like, trust me, I am concerned about Chinese manufacturing and how there is the potential of a security risk there. I do think that there is the potential for a security risk with China. That doesn't mean that I'm just going to jump on everything that says, look out because China's doing this. I think that's a bad way to go. I want evidence. I want facts. I want to know what's actually going on, not just what somebody's conjecturing. So, okay, Huawei's phone sales are ballooning while Apple and Samsung slump. And this was, again, May 1st. This was the beginning of this month. IDC and Strategy Analytics have released their latest smartphone shipment numbers, and the clear winner of the last few months has been China's Huawei. Samsung and Apple, both of which lost ground. And here's a nice little chart here. This is the worldwide top 5 smartphone companies. And this was in 2019, the first quarter of 2019 unit market share. So we've got Samsung is the darker blue, which is this top line. They are the number 1 cell phone sales, right? And they did go up, which is interesting, right? They said that it slumped, yet I see an increase there. I'm not really sure what that's all about. Seems like there might be maybe a little bias in that report, or maybe I'm just reading the graph wrong. That's possible. But you can see Huawei here is this slightly darker blue. It's more teal, right? And you can see they surpass Apple. Apple's this even lighter blue, right? So Huawei is definitely, and you can see they're kind of on this gradual increase, Huawei is. Apple is kind of like up and down, right? We have a really good month in the fourth quarter, and that probably has to coincide, I believe, with they had a new phone, like Apple released a brand new phone. And Samsung is kind of doing the same thing, but then also they released a fairly new phone at the beginning of this year. So there's like a lot of this is going to be based upon the releases of new phones. And Huawei here, though, even though, I mean, they're pretty steadily increasing, right? As opposed to kind of the graphs that we see with Samsung and Apple, where it's just kind of like jumpy because of the new releases of each phone. So, okay. Apple's iPhone shipments shrunk from 52.2 million in the quarter last year to what's estimated to be between 36 and 43 million. Samsung went from 78.2 million shipments to 71.9. That's a little bit of a decrease. It's not, that's money. Don't get me wrong. That's millions of dollars of money. But that's not a huge decline as far as I can tell. AT&T and Verizon last week reported that smartphone upgrades are among the lowest subscribers, among their subscribers are at record lows. So AT&T and Verizon are obviously the two largest services here in America. I honestly don't know what it is in the UK. I don't know what you guys have over there. But yeah, so smartphone upgrades are among their subscribers are at record lows. Sony's sales keep dwindling, which, they're barely even in the market. LG, again, quit making phones in its home country of South Korea. So, like, LG's not really there. Sony's dwindling. If you remember HTC, I used to have an HTC phone. I loved that phone. But they're just barely technically even in it because they've got this blockchain, that zany blockchain phone. The company has been very publicly rejected by the United States government. This is, again, Huawei, right? And it has zero presence in that highly lucrative and developed market. So here you have basically friends in Apple and Samsung to the U.S., right? We love Samsung and we love Apple in America. And we've got no presence of Huawei. Yet Huawei is making ground, right? They're starting to become a very dominant force in the market. Apple and Samsung have contented themselves with mostly iterative updates. Yeah, this is the thing. If you look at what's going on with Apple and Samsung, what can you say is the major technical revolution of what they've been doing with their phone? Like, what's the reason why you would buy the next phone? What's so great about the next one? Not really much, right? There's not really much technologically there in form of advancement. And, honestly, there's only so much you can do with it, right? Like, you've got the phone. It's cool. It's got its capabilities. You might have a better and better camera on it. But really, it's kind of the software, right, that makes things go better. And if you can continuously release better upgraded software to the phones, and it's older phones that get those upgrades, then why would you buy a new one? Okay, so Huawei has consistently made huge strides between every device release. Now, this could be just this writer's opinion. I honestly don't know. And I'm going to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt that this is even factual. Huawei has consistently made huge strides between every device release. I don't know. Like, that seems like a very subjective thing to say. And there isn't really anything, the company has invested heavily in its camera hardware, which is paid off with terrific performance, currently unmatched in low light, and has stirred smartphone owners to hit the upgrade button. Okay, so that's the evidence of why, but I don't know. This still seems like a very generic term, a generic statement that doesn't really seem to be backed up by facts, just kind of like this impression. But it could be true, right? The author could be very well accurate in what he's saying or she's saying. I didn't check the name. Who is it? Who wrote this? Vlad Savov. Okay. Thank you very much, Vlad, for putting this together. The company has been very publicly rejected by the United States. We already talked about that. Okay, the goal for Huawei has always been to become the top smartphone vendor in the world. Huawei forecasts it will get out ahead of Samsung by the end of the year. Now remember, this is the beginning of this month, before the trade war, right? Okay. So Huawei is on its way up. They don't do any business in America. Apple and Samsung are in the decline, not doing all that great. Okay. So what happens? Well, President Trump happens, right? So, Google blocks Huawei access to Android updates after blacklisting. So Google blocks Huawei access to Android updates after blacklisting. So President Trump basically signed an executive order saying that there's going to be some tariffs and possibly even blocking any sort of trade. So there's a trade blacklist, right? U.S. government added it to the trade blacklist last week. So there's tariffs going on. There's a trade blacklist, which, basically Trump is saying you can't do any business with these companies anymore. And one of those blacklisted companies was Huawei. So that means the companies that are doing business with Huawei, like Google, have to figure out how they're going to, what kind of policies are they going to employ, which basically means the U.S. government, when they add it to the trade blacklist, Google had to suspend Huawei's access to updates of its Android operating system, right? So basically, oops, can I undo that? Oh, well, doesn't matter. So they had to stop, right? They had to block all of the access on Huawei's devices to Google because Google is an American company. What did I just say is what makes phones worth? Like what have we talked about all on this channel all the time? The platform doesn't matter if you don't have the developers, if you don't have the software. Right? So to me, this almost seems like a strategy. If you just look at this from a purely economic perspective, not economics, but from a pure how do you gain traction in the world, right? How would you, if you are not getting any sales of the phone in the U.S., how is the U.S. going to affect Huawei? This would be it, right? This would be it. Basically say, all those companies in America that are doing business, you've got to stop. And one of those just happens to be Google, right? The operating system for Huawei. So that's a big deal, right? The underlying operating system that runs these phones, the developer of that operating system can no longer give you updates for your hardware. That's a pretty giant step there, right? So Google blocks Huawei's access to Android updates after blacklisting. Okay. U.S. government added it to the blacklist trade list. To the trade blacklist. There we go. Google said it was complying with an executive order issued by Donald Trump. Google Play and the security features of its antivirus software, Google Play Protect, would continue on existing in Huawei's devices. New versions of its smartphones outside of China would lose access to popular applications and services, including Google Play Maps and Google and Gmail app. So the security features and antiviruses would continue to go on, but new versions of its smartphone outside of China would lose access to popular applications and services. Okay, so Huawei will continue to have access to the version of the Android operating system still, though, because it's available through open source. Because it's open source, it's not restricted to these limitations. So basically, Google cannot push these updates out to the phones. What they can do, though, is they can make the updates in the open source, and then if Huawei wants to figure out how to pull those changes in from the open source community, then they can do that. So it's kind of like a loophole in a way, right? Google's just publishing it, and if they just so happen to figure out a way of getting that thing, then great. But if Google is not actively pushing out these updates to the phones, then they're not in violation of the order. Okay, so Google will stop providing technical support and collaboration for Android and Google services. Okay, so that's basically that's kind of it. They do go into much more detail here. So Huawei responded, promising to continue providing security updates and after-sales service for its smartphones and tablets. Huawei has made substantial contributions to the development and growth of Android around the world. As one of Android's key global partners, we've worked closely with their open source platform to develop an ecosystem that has benefited both users and the industry. So this was a quote made by Huawei. Okay. Support for Chinese enterprises is defending their legitimate rights through legal methods, said Luo Kang, okay, who is the Chinese Minister of Foreign Affairs. So Lu Kang. He says, so support for Chinese enterprises in defending their legitimate rights through legal methods. Observers say Chinese countermeasures could include encouraging a consumer boycott of U.S. goods, such as Apple products. Ooh, there it is. China is Apple's third largest market by sales volume. So, this is how you get a trade war, right? This is how you get a trade war. You say our companies can no longer do business with that country. That country says, fine, we're not going to do business with your large companies, right? That's one way that they could go. So, and that's probably where they will go. Maybe. I don't know. Like, this doesn't really affect the U.S. This is kind of sneaky if you think about it. Because if China is Apple's third largest market, do you think the Chinese people will be really, really happy if China basically says, you guys can't do Apple anymore? It's the third most popular phone in China. How many people do you think are going to be real happy about that in China? Whereas this going on between the U.S., so us basically blocking Huawei, how does that affect us? Who's going to get real mad about this? Is it going to be the people of America? Or is it going to be Google? Is it going to be Apple? Right? It's going to be the large companies who can theoretically kind of take the hit. And if they do complain, it's not like you're going to get a bunch of support in the community for them. So really, I still think even if that's the case, even if China says, oh, we're going to suspend, Apple in China, who do you think that's really going to hurt? Is that really going to hurt the American people? It's going to hurt Apple, no doubt about that. But are you going to get a huge outpouring of American citizens saying, no, stop? No. So this is the thing. Yes, there's definitely some economic forces that are going to be impacted by this. But overall, I think U.S. still makes out in this, right? We don't really use you guys. We don't really need you guys. But you need us. There's a bit of leverage being used there. Okay. Huawei previously said it's developing its own backup operating system. Good luck with that, guys. And then you have to push that out to all your phones. That'll be real fun. Richard Yu, the head of the company's consumer division, said the company had a plan B. We have prepared our own operating system. Should it ever happen that we can no longer use these systems, we would be prepared. tell you what, buddy, good luck. Good luck. You're just going to replace the operating system on the number one phone in your area. You're just the number one phone in China. You're just going to replace everybody's operating system. How are you going to do that? How are you going to do that? I'm just saying, like, this is a great little threat here. Like, oh, we're totally prepared. Really? Have you ever tried to replace the operating system on, like, oh, I don't know, just toss this number out. Say 78 million phones, or was that, 78 million phones? It's probably even more than that, right? There's probably like 200 million phones in China. And they're probably, that are like Huawei, right? So just tossing out that number. I don't really know the actual number, but if you could imagine 200 million phones out there, you're going to replace the operating system on all of them. How are you going to do that? How are you going to do that? What you going to, like, everybody has to turn in their phones to some sort of ministry, right? The Ministry of Technology. Everybody turn in their phones so we can do an update. You can't do it. Like, that's a very idle threat is what that is. That is a very, very idle threat that's just like, oh yeah, we're totally prepared for this. Bullshit you are. There's no way. Okay, Intel, Qualcomm, Xilinx, and Broadcom have told employees they will not supply chips to Huawei until further notice. So there is even more devastating news. If you are Huawei, it's like, okay, so you can't get the operating system anymore. You're not going to get the chips from America anymore. And you don't sell to the American market. Yikes. Right? And what kind of leverage do you have on America? Let's hope that they the Chinese government goes after Apple. Apple's only the third largest. I mean, Apple's large, right? So you're going to have a lot of really angry Chinese people, but I don't really see the leverage being China's in this case, right? China, even though they do a lot of the manufacturing for chips and stuff, it's like this is the one weak spot, if you will. Like, this is one of the companies that's a weak spot. Okay. Trump administration officially added the telecoms manufacturer to a trade blacklist on Thursday. Trump claimed imposing tariffs on Chinese goods was already bearing fruit by encouraging companies to move manufacturing to other countries. Who would have thought? This is the thing I always hear about the tariffs too, right? Like, the idea of tariffs or blacklisting is you don't want to do it because it's going to impact the prices of consumer goods here in America. And there's truth to that. There's definitely truth to that. However, what's going to happen is companies are going to move. There's a lot of alternatives. There's Malaysia, right? There's India. There's Indonesia. There's plenty of manufacturing. There's Germany. There's Israel. We know that there is plenty of manufacturing for these chips and phones elsewhere. It is possible to move from out of China and still maintain a pretty relatively low, inexpensive cost. So, yes, tariffs, if you are dealing with a country that has only one good, like, is the only manufacturer of that good, then yes, you are in serious danger when you apply tariffs for that one thing. But if you are talking about a good that can be created or developed or manufactured in any other area as well, then, whatever. It's not a big deal. It's not going to really be that impactful. Now, I do have some more thoughts on exactly all of this, and I could go into some deep detail about why I think. So I'm neither pro nor against tariffs. Okay, I'm not against them. I'm not for them. I think that they can be a tool when used appropriately to provide some leverage. And I think that in this case, this is not a tariff that we're talking about. This is a blacklist, right? But it's still kind of the same thing. We're using your trade in order to affect and influence. It's not good as far as the hostilities between countries, and I believe that trade is one of the best ways to create, in order to impart political influence. if you are both selling goods, it's in both of your best interests. Boy, I can't speak today. It's in both of your best interests to work together, right? If you both are doing goods and services back and forth to each other. So starting to break some of those things is really just a political tool. It should only be a political tool. They should not be used as an economic tool. That's the thing. Okay? Tariffs are good political tools. For the U.S., they are very bad economic tools because the cost of labor in America is higher than it is in almost any other country, which means, basically that has to do with minimum wage, in my opinion. I think that we've ballooned minimum wage so high and we have so much inflation in America that it's just kind of the way it is now. And that's a very serious situation that we've put ourselves in. So that's a whole other discussion about minimum wage I'd love to have sometime. But yeah, so Huawei has long been accused of espionage while there's no definitive proven cases. To me, this is all about we're going to use this threat, this fear that people have. We're going to leverage that to say this is what we should do. And it's really about politics. Okay? And one of those things I think is also the politics of maybe Apple. This might be something where Apple and Samsung have come to Donald Trump and said, hey, we're starting to get beat by this company. Is there something we can do? Like, can you broker some sort of deal? I don't know. Maybe some backroom deal has been made. And this is like a way of them imparting influence. I doubt that, but it's possible, right? Okay. There's much, much more. I got other articles, like here's what the definition of a tariff is, which is a really good explanation on Investopedia. If you're looking more into what tariffs are and how they work. An ad valorem tariff is levied based upon the item's value, so that's pretty good. Tariffs are used to restrict imports by increasing the price of goods and services purchased from another country, making them less attractive to domestic customers. I really like what's down here a little bit later, though. The theory of comparative advantage. This is kind of really the economic theory behind everything, which is good to know. If one country is better at producing a certain product while another country is better at producing another, each should devote its resources to the activity at which it excels. Now, that's great. But what we're talking about is manufacturing of something. It's not like a special good that we don't already know how to manufacture. We know it's really all it is about cheap labor, right? It's cheaper in China. It's cheap labor in China. All you have to do is find another place that has cheap labor that you can negotiate with, and you can continue with these lower prices. Okay, so that's why it's not necessarily an economic tool in this case. It is a political tool. It's threatening China with saying, hey, we're going to move our business elsewhere. That's really what it is. But there's so much of this anti-tariff, and I get it. Like, I don't like tariffs as a general rule. I don't like tariffs because it does typically end up being a cost to the consumer. But if the business that's producing the good can move their manufacturing relatively inexpensively, move their manufacturing to another country that's just as low or, just as cost effective, then why not do that? Right? And maybe these companies should have been doing that the whole while. Maybe they already have. Maybe they've already had plans to do that. Maybe that's why they're so quick and easy to move off of China. We're seeing Intel and Qualcomm, etc. All of them are dropping China like that. You think they weren't prepared for this? Right? So all this fear about tariffs going up, I think is a little unfounded. I get it. I understand the fear. I don't like them either. But at the same time, this isn't one that's going to be as dramatic. It's not going to just destroy the American economy. We're talking about a phone manufacturer that we don't even use in the market. And the best that they can do is say, we're going to piss off our own Chinese people because we're going to drop Apple. Right? And oh, by the way, we have this operating system. Good luck with that. Right? There's really no leverage here for China on that one. They're kind of the paper tagger in this case. Now, I don't know that that's going to last. I think that they're going to find our weak spot. That's what's going to happen. They're going to find our weak spot and try to apply pressure there. And that's where I'm concerned. That's where the next move is really going to come from China. Now, just to let you guys know, there has been a 30-day lift of the ban for now. while negotiations are still ongoing with China. But basically, the U.S. has said, you know what, we're gonna step back from this blacklist, and we're gonna give you guys 30 days. So there's been a little softening on that policy, but it's temporary. It's a timeline, and guess what? This is good negotiation tactics. That's what you do. Here's the thing about Donald Trump. If you start to examine everything that he does that is just so dumb and silly and ridiculous and like, what the hell is he thinking? And you start to look at it from the perspective of he's a negotiator. He's negotiating. Like, that's all he's doing. He's negotiating. What are the negotiation tactics that you would do? Come out with the most extreme position and demands. The most extreme position and demands, and show them a window. Here's what you guys got to do. If you're going to soften my position, and of course you use like that thing that's the most devastating, right? What's the worst that I could possibly do? And then I'm going to give you guys an opportunity here. That's how you negotiate. I'm not saying that I like Donald Trump. Like, let me get that also out. I'm not a huge fan of Donald Trump. I think that he's not exactly the greatest leader that we've ever had. But when you start looking at the way that he's conducting himself in these cases, he's doing exactly what is necessary in order to improve the economic status of the United States, which is crazy because we're already basically the number one economy in the world. But he's using that power to leverage even better deals. Okay? And that's pretty crazy. That's pretty amazing that he's able to do this. And for all of his faults, this is one thing he's good at. And everybody looks at stuff that he's doing like this and saying, man, are you crazy? Well, that's exactly what you need to do if you're going to be a good negotiator. You have to make everybody think you are willing to do the most outlandish possible thing, and you better figure out a way to make him back down from that position. That's really what's going on here. And people say, well, Trump's doing that 4D chess. In some cases, yeah. When it comes to negotiations and trade deals and stuff like this, yeah, he has got this down. He knows what he's doing. And every time that you see one of these ridiculous claims that he's putting out there, just understand, is he doing that because he's really insane? Or is he doing it because he knows that he can make that a negotiation point, right? That's kind of the brilliance of it. But again, I don't really like him so much as a leader. I don't think he's, I'm a bigger fan of like Ronald Reagan's, right? I like the idea of empowering, like inspiring Americans, and that's not necessarily something that he really does. So, SAA Consulting says they also make laptops, tablets, and wearables readily available on Amazon and B&H Photo. Oh, okay. So that's good to know. I don't think that's probably not. They're not one of the larger names that I think you're going to find in America. But yeah, you can probably buy some of that stuff online and get it. Like there's plenty of Chinese manufacturers you can buy from and then have it delivered through Amazon. My wife says, can't hear you. I know, babe. Sorry about that. I accidentally hit the mute button. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you guys enjoyed this broadcast. It's a pretty deep conversation, a pretty deep topic, and it's definitely mixed with a bit of technology, a bit of politics. It's going to be interesting to see how this all comes about, because I think ultimately China is going to have to cave. I do think that. I think China is eventually going to have to cave, because what is the major pressure point that they have on us? We've already proven that we don't really need them for chips and motherboards and stuff like that. We've proven that we don't really need them. We like them because they are cheap and inexpensive to go through China to get those goods. But do we really need Chinese goods in order to sustain our economy? And I think that this is a good example of where there's a lot of fear on the part of Americans, and an understandable fear, that we receive all these goods and services from China. Here we have a trade war with China. Things are going to go really terribly. But if you look at it with a little bit finer magnifying glass and try to inspect some of the details, you may find out that, China relies upon us much more than we rely upon them. And that's kind of the way it is right now. They rely upon us much more than we rely upon them. And Donald Trump is using that as a pressure on them in order to get them to be a little bit more lenient towards Americans, I think, to the American companies. Right now, it's kind of, trade war-ish, but I don't think that this is going to be sustained. I don't think that, if you think that the end goal of the Donald Trump administration is to break off ties with China, then I'm sorry, but you really don't understand the man or the politics, okay? That's not the goal. The goal is not to make us completely independent of China. We just are threatening that we could if we needed to. And that's the only way that you apply economic and political leverage on a country, to get them to kind of fall in line with what you want. Now, we only can do this because we are in the position that we are. We did the same thing with Canada, those poor guys up in Canada, right? Like we did the same kind of thing with Canada and NAFTA. Like hey, we may not do this NAFTA thing anymore. Oh my God, Donald Trump is absolutely insane. He's going to break NAFTA. Well, hold on a minute. Maybe Canada is going to come back with some sort of deal. And they did. And then it all worked out. Is everybody upset about NAFTA still? Is NAFTA gone? No. It's just a way of negotiating, right? And that's what you got to remember about this whole situation. It's Donald Trump doing negotiation. And you may not like his tactics. I may not like his tactics. I may not like the man. You may not like the man. But you can't argue with how effective it is. It's very, very effective. And we've seen the economy in America take off as a result of these tactics. We see a lot of ups and downs, right? The market is like, oh my God, what did Donald Trump say today? But then ultimately at the end, you see a rise. You see those things happen. And that's good. That's good for the long-term success of America. My concern is what's going to happen when the next president comes in and doesn't know how to do this and starts to turn back some of these policies because boo Donald Trump, boo Orange Man, and turn back all of these policies just because they don't want his legacy to continue. And we could see some problems after Trump leaves as a result. Anyway, okay, so that's my thoughts. That's my take on all this stuff. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, don't forget to hit that thumbs up button. Let me know that you liked the video. And also drop me a comment in the comment section letting me know, did you like this? Did you not like it? What are some of the topics that you'd like to have me cover? I know my wife has come up with some good suggestions, and I am going to do them, babe. I promise to you that I will do them, okay? I will. Anyway, thank you so much, guys, for joining me today. I hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye-bye.